Secretary, I would love to turn to semiconductors because that's where we saw a lot of that mixed messaging, especially over the weekend. The Trump administration said that they are conducting a Section 232 investigation into the import of semiconductors, and this is largely viewed as a harbinger to implement tariffs. I'm curious how you think the Trump administration is doing vis-a-vis semiconductors and tariffs.
Well, 232 is the basic legislation. Section 232 is the basic legislation that we used in the Trump's first administration. So that ground is very well trodden. It's been tested all the way up to the Supreme Court. So there's one good thing about it is we know that it works, and we know that it will be upheld on appeal. What's bad about it is it slows things down a bit because you have to prepare and research a very detailed report. You have to get the written concurrence of the Secretary of Defense. You have to have public hearings. You have a whole lot of steps you need to go through. So it's better in the sense that it's more bulletproof. It's worse in the sense that it takes a bit longer to complete. But as to whether we need a, a program for semiconductors, I think we clearly do. You may remember I was the big proponent of the CHIPS Act in the first administration. And while it did get passed and it's finally getting to be implemented, even that will not make us self-sufficient in semiconductors. We still will be importing a majority of the semiconductors that we consume. And we are, in fact, the world's largest consumer of semiconductors. So it is important to put up a tariff wall so that there's further assurance to people building semiconductor fabrication in the US that they will have a market, and they will have a market that's not interfered with by products subsidized from other countries.
Before we move on there, I do want to get your take on what you would say to Secretary Lutnick about the Section 232, because you gave a pros and cons list. He has 9 months to complete the investigation, but he indicated that he will implement tariffs on semis in 1 to 2 months. What's your advice to him when it comes to this Section 232?
Well, clearly, anytime a president asks for something to be investigated, he has a target that the end result of the investigation will be a recommended action. Otherwise, he wouldn't bother to request the investigation to be done. So that's pretty logical. As to Secretary Lutnick, as I've said, I think we need to become more self-sufficient in semiconductors. I think what's important, though, is whatever level of tariff they aim to put on, there perhaps should be a graduated path to it, because it takes 2 to 3 years to build a semiconductor facility and to train the workers to do it. It's very, very technical work, very precise work, because remember, you're dealing with very, very small things, couple of nanometers in dimension, and it takes 3 nanometers to make one human hair in size. So you're dealing with really minute things, and you got to get it exactly right. So I think a phasing in of it in some way would make sense, because if you put a giant tariff on semiconductors right now, it won't stop the imports because we do not have the capacity to make enough semiconductors. So all it will do is raise the cost of semiconductors. And therefore, I would recommend that they consider a ramp up over a couple of year time period.
To that point, you can't exactly snap your fingers and make a semiconductor factory in the United States. As you said, it takes about 2 to 3 years. So, do you think that these tariffs are premature? Would it make more sense for the tariffs to wait while we beef up domestic manufacturing?
No, I don't think they're premature in the sense that um, we do need to send the very clear message that there are going to be very big tariffs on them from countries. We need to give businesses who are considering putting in a fabricating plant assurance that this is real, that there really be tariffs. And remember, a fab plant is billions of dollars. These are very, very expensive things to build because you need to make them pretty large scale. They have to be extremely clean. There are a whole lot of requirements that are much more precise than, let's say, building an automotive factory or something like that. So I don't think it's premature, especially because if you go through the list of the president's several objectives, one of them is raising revenues. And so semiconductor tariffs are certainly one way to raise revenue.
How, let's say you were Commerce Secretary right now, how exactly would you implement the semiconductor tariffs? Because you said you would do it in a more phased approach. What would that look like under Commerce Secretary Ross?
Well, what will be important will be we probably will end up with different tariffs on the same product depending on the country it comes from. And if we end up that way, then we will also need to work out with the lower tariff countries uh, a situation where they won't accept semiconductors to come in from, say, China on a transshipment basis and benefit from the lower tariff of that other country. So it's going to be both sides of our supplier countries that we need to deal with. And that's a complication. With the semiconductors also are not a homogeneous entity. The size of the semiconductor in general, the smaller the size, the more powerful and the more useful. So the commodity type ones, the very large ones, are not necessarily of military significance, but are of commercial significance. Typical automobile has between 400 and 500 semiconductors in it, most of which are fairly commodity type. So there's also a difference, at least in my personal view, of the national security implications, depending on whether it's a very high tech one or a very low tech. So I would hope they give attention to not just the mass fact of semiconductors, but also to which size, which quality, which power they're dealing with, and perhaps treat them differently.